What's happening? My name is goukigod, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing Battlefield 1 on the PS4. So Battlefield 1 is the first of the big 3 military shooters of this year to drop. It's the only of the 3 not to be featured in the future and to feature predominantly boots on the ground gameplay. It's also the first Battlefield game not to be set in a modern setting since 2010, and it's the first Battlefield game to be set in World War I. There's a lot that's different about this Battlefield, and along with a new historical setting, Battlefield 1 has also tried a different approach with its campaign. So the big questions are, does the new setting, weapons, vehicles and changes to the multiplayer work? How has the gameplay been affected? And most importantly, is it any good? Let's start with the campaign, as this is something that I normally steer clear of. Battlefield campaigns have historically not been received all that well, particularly in the most recent titles. DICE has thrown out their previous formula and tried something different, and for the most part, it's a success. Unlike the previous Battlefield games, the campaign is split into 6 relatively unconnected chapters that you can tackle in pretty much any order you like after you've completed the introductory chapter. Each chapter focuses on a different part of the war, as well as giving you the opportunity to try out different vehicles, classes and equipment. From a gameplay standpoint, it does a pretty good job of walking you through the basics, and it's definitely worth playing through before you jump into the multiplayer. Even if you're a seasoned Battlefield vet, it's a good way to get a feel for the game, plus it only takes about 4 or 5 hours to complete. Being able to complete each chapter in around an hour or less makes it pretty easy to digest as well, so you can really tackle it at your own pace. Each chapter has its own separate story and it follows a different set of characters, and although the stories don't link into each other, they do all share a common theme. They all convey how brutal the war was, the unimaginable human cost, and the sheer chaos of the battlefield. There's a great sense of it being about survival rather than overcoming a great evil single-handedly as some kind of one-man super soldier. The quality of the pre-rendered cutscenes and the performances in them is pretty good overall, and I actually found myself paying attention to what was going on and wanting to know what was going to happen next. This is really unusual for me too, because I normally skip the campaign in these types of games altogether. Now the story in each chapter is deliberately designed to pull on your heartstrings, and it can be a little bit ham-fisted at times, but overall it's a nice change of pace from your typical oorah FPS campaign. I thought the chapter about the Australians was particularly well done. As an Australian, I find that Aussie accents are usually horrifically overdone in movies, TV, and especially video games. The Australian accents in Battlefield 1 are pretty authentic, so well done DICE for not making everyone sound like Steve Irwin.
You just wanted a statue of yourself in your town square! I think I'm gonna be sick.
As someone who's been to Gallipoli, I actually felt a real emotional connection to this chapter, which is something that video games rarely do for me. Overall, the campaign does a great job at establishing the tone for the multiplayer and providing some solid real-life context. The biggest question for a lot of people is, have all the changes altered the way that Battlefield plays, and does it still feel like a Battlefield game? For the most part, yeah, totally. If you've played any Battlefield before, then you'll know what to expect. And to some degree, this means that there are still a few legacy issues that haven't been ironed out yet. For example, when you spawn in at a location that's miles away from the action, having to run halfway across a map to get back into the fight has never been fun, and it's made even worse by the huge maps in Battlefield 1. But for the most part, these sorts of issues are small annoyances, and there aren't too many of them. The biggest changes to the multiplayer come in the form of the new/old weapons and vehicles. There's also been changes to the various classes. So you still have 4 classes, which are Assault, Support, Medic and Scout, which are similar to the previous games, but the roles that they play have been slightly altered. For example, the Assault class is now the go-to class for taking out vehicles, while the Medic class can now repair vehicles along with healing teammates. Weapon categories are similar to the previous games, but obviously the shift to 100-year-old weaponry means that things like iron sights, rates of fire, recoil and reload times are all really different to the previous games. As a result, many of the weapons in Battlefield 1 require a totally different playstyle, and this has a big impact on how the overall game is played. Now I'll be the first to admit that I'm no MLG pro and my accuracy is questionable at best. My strategy is usually to pin the trigger and hope for the best, and while this isn't a strategy that I would advise and accuracy is still important, it does feel like smart gameplay is rewarded just as much as twitch reflexes. Don't get me wrong, quick reflexes and sharp aiming skills are still essential, particularly for those head-on gunfights, but positioning and managing your weapon's various limitations are equally as important. Superior positioning such as flanking and having the upper ground, for example, will often get you the jump on enemies, and Battlefield 1's map design really encourages this type of strategy with loads of elevation and cover. Knowing your weapon's behavior is really important too. Getting caught out by a long reload time or forgetting to manually cycle a new round, for example, will most often result in death. I think it's these kinds of changes that really sets Battlefield 1 apart from the previous games and other first-person shooters. Overall, the changes to the multiplayer are large enough to make it feel fresh while not being so dramatic that it doesn't feel like a Battlefield game. So let's move on to the presentation. Visually, there's no denying that Battlefield 1 is very pretty. Even on console running at sub 1080p resolution, it's a beautiful looking game. I believe on PS4 the resolution actually hovers natively between 1000p and 900p using dynamic resolution to maintain a constant frame rate. The Xbox One version is apparently slightly less, with a maximum of 900p scaling down to 720p. I would assume that on PS4 Pro it probably pushes out a native 1080p, but that's purely speculation, I have no idea. Now, as I mentioned before, the maps are huge and highly detailed as well. It's really easy to get distracted by something epic happening or just the scale of the battlefield. In my opinion, it's easily the best looking game DICE has ever made, and this includes Star Wars Battlefront as well. Now the good news is that it sounds just as good as it looks. Explosions have a real weight to them, gunfire echoes realistically, and knowing that all the noise of the battle is being created in real time by other players is really immersive. On top of that, the game has a really great orchestral score, which uses the traditional Battlefield theme well to create something that sounds more thematically and time appropriate. So how does Battlefield 1 perform? Well, obviously DICE doesn't have the most fantastic track record. I've personally had issues with every single Battlefield title since Battlefield 3, and I've had huge issues with Battlefront as well. This is by far the most stable DICE game I've ever played at launch. I haven't had any startup or installation issues, and my online experience has been pretty flawless except for a few minor bits of lag here and there. Frame rate performance seems to be a pretty constant 60 frames per second, although I have noticed some minor dips when there's a load of stuff happening at once. It wasn't remotely close to interfering with the gameplay though, so nothing to be overly concerned about. Otherwise, Battlefield 1 looks great and plays smoothly, so again, well done DICE. So, in summary, I think Battlefield 1 makes enough changes to make the experience feel new and exciting without changing what makes Battlefield Battlefield. The switch from a modern / present day setting to World War I really works, and it's exactly the kind of change I've been looking for in a AAA FPS. It's clear that going back to the series' roots was the right decision for Battlefield, and hopefully Call of Duty is taking notes. If a top quality boots on the ground shooter is what you're after, then this is easy to recommend.
Attack the new objectives.